talking, moving right along. No break this time. Usually I give people like a minute break to go to the bathroom, but I think you just do it. Hi, thanks. So this week we've got VCs, San Francisco VCs is the category. Since we're getting close to demo day, and today the topic was sort of financials and fundraising and exiting, the life cycle of a company. I just wanted to introduce everyone here has a pretty strong Harvey Mudd connection. Ho of Altos Ventures went to Harvey Mudd. What year were you? You don't have to say. But
I was 88.
88. All right. And I was 98. And then Sergio and Mar are both on the board with me, though they did not attend. Correct? I don't think so. Yeah. And they've known each other a long time.
Kids that are attending.
Oh, you both have kids going. Okay, that's what it is. Oh, that makes sense. And you guys have known each other for a while up in the Bay Area, in the circles.
A long time. We're still young though.
Way too long.
Well,
We're still young and vibrant.
cool. So I guess I'll just start. Yeah, let everyone. I just like go around and let people introduce themselves, or like give your little how you went from probably college to where you are now in like 3 minutes or so. A 3-minute pitch. Ho, we'll start with you since you jumped on first.
Sure.
After Harvey
Well,
Mudd.
I got out of school in 88. I moved to San Francisco right away to work for Bain, which is a strategy consulting firm. And back in those days, Bain only had 2 offices in the US, Boston and San Francisco. So that's where I ended up. And then I actually went to a VC firm called Trinity Ventures back in 1990. So that's 30 years ago that I first got into venture. And that was Trinity had a couple of folks from Bain. So that was my connection. And did that for a couple of years before business school, went to Stanford, and then went to work at SGI, a tech company that is kind of gone now, but used to be a hot company back in the day. And then started Altos in 96, which is like almost 25 years ago now, with a couple of classmates from business school, and started with a tiny little $30 million fund. And over the years, we've kind of grown. We have about 4 billion under management at this point, but we're very different than a typical early stage venture fund in that we have most of our money concentrated in a very small number of companies. So 3 out of 4 billion is in only 5 companies out of 97 companies or so. And the strategy that we have is most VCs are exempt from registering with the SEC. Because we create jobs and all that kind of stuff. We don't have to register like a typical fund manager, but we are registered because our strategy is to start with these little companies. And I consider venture capital to be really the world's greatest discovery mechanism of finding interesting companies. But when we find those interesting companies, we like to build them and keep them for a long time. And so over time, we end up putting a lot more money into our winners that grow sometimes over decades. And so we don't really have any restrictions in terms of how much money we would put into a company. I think the most we've put into one company is over $400 million. But we started with that investment with $1.5 million. So we will kind of grow with our companies. It's kind of the unique thing. And then we're very different than any other later stage investor because we don't go chasing unicorns of other people's companies. Like we only invest in our own companies over time. So I don't try to go find some famous company because it's a hot deal and I got to try to put the next 50 or $100 million in and compete against some other later stage investor. So if we do a good job with our companies, usually we become the preferred equity partner for the long term. If we don't do a good job, then they find their best friends from some later stage fund, and Sequoia comes calling or some other famous VC, and they say, well, I'd rather work with this person. Thank you, Altos, for giving me my first $1 million, but you're not really useful to me now. And sometimes that could happen, but usually we usually have a competitive advantage in getting more of our best companies if we do a good job and work with those companies from the earliest days, and then they become good friends of ours, and we sometimes work together for 20 years. So that's kind of a Altos in a nutshell, and I'll sort of let other folks talk about their strategies. thousands of VCs around the world. Every VC has their own little strategy. It's a little bit different. So it'll be good for you guys to hear from different investors and what they do.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, Sergio, how about in order of on my screen?
Of appearance, yeah. Hey guys, thanks. Hey Josh, this is awesome. Thanks for setting it up. And it's great to reconnect with Ho and obviously with Mar. I've known her for a long time. It's great. And it's good to hear from the Mud folks as well at some point with their questions. So my name is Sergio Monsalve. I've been on the board of Harvey Mudd for 3 years, I believe, and I'm also co-chairing the entrepreneurial initiatives sort of subcommittee. So that's something that I'm pretty passionate about, which I'm happy to tell you about. And my son will be going to Mudd. He's taken a gap year, but he was accepted and he'll be going to Mudd next year. So I'm very excited about the school and the consortium in general. My story is not dissimilar to I think what you'll hear here among the three of us is I'm an immigrant from Mexico. I came here from when I was roughly in high school, around high school, and I came to Stanford, fell in love with Silicon Valley and entrepreneurship, and after a stint in the East Coast where I went to business school at Harvard, I came right back, and I've been an entrepreneur and also an operator for initially the first part of my career. In fact, I have a very close tie to Trinity Ventures. So Ho was there before me, but I was funded by Trinity twice by another Bain guy, Gus Tai. So I know the Trinity folks well, great firm. And in fact, I was an EIR there before I became a VC. So that's how I fell in love with sort of investing and really thinking through how to help entrepreneurs. So I was an entrepreneur first, operator, and then I became a VC as 13 years ago at a firm called Norwest Partners, which is now a multi-stage, multi-region, multi-sector firm. And as of last year, I'm looking to start my own fund, which is much more around thematic approach. I'm very focused. As of the last 5 years, I've been focused on what I call the future of work and future of learning. I teach a class at Stanford on education tech. I've been really focused on education as well as the upskilling and reskilling our workforce. And so that's been my theme. I'm on the board of Udemy, which is a large company in San Francisco that is a marketplace for education, giving access to people around the world skills that they would need to kind of upskill and reskill themselves, and that's a passion of mine. So that's been the focus. I generally have a Series C, Series A, and Series B approach, and generally, I think the thematic approach works for me because as venture matures, I do think that there's a need for venture capitalists to have much more of domain expertise where you could actually access a lot more contacts in this specific domain where you're going to help the entrepreneurs. And so I think the thematic approach is something that I think is going to become very, very important in the future as we mature and verticalize and specialize as venture investors as well as entrepreneurs. So that's why I'm branching out and doing my own thing. In the meantime, I'm not stopping. I've made 2 investments this month, and I'm hoping to make a lot more in the next coming months as well.
All right, thanks, Sergio. And last but not least, Mar, nice to meet you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I was, I think, like Sergio mentioned, my son is a freshman this year, a virtual freshman, I guess, not quite. But when I heard that you were running this incubator, I thought that's awesome. I have to get involved and help out whichever way. So I'm happy this is the first thing I can do. And it's great to be with Ho and Sergio as well. I think I'm very different from them, so that's awesome. It's what Ho says. The great thing about venture is that we all have completely different strategies. There's many ways to be successful and build great companies. So I'm from Spain and I came here in 95. I said I came right when the internet was starting. I was very lucky. And I got my PhD in electrical engineering at Stanford. I started 3 companies out of Stanford in the semiconductor industry. So I'm like a chip designer, analog chip designer by training, which is, it's not very sexy in cocktail parties, but, in some crowds it is, I guess. Anyways, that's what I did for many years. And somehow I got pulled into venture. One of my investors said, Mar, I think you should come and be an EIR. An EIR, which Sergio also mentioned, is the best job you can have. They pay you to hang around this venture firm and give you smart input. You don't have to ship a product. You don't have to sell a product. You don't have to do anything other than give your great advice. But it was great because I learned a lot and I knew whereas when you design and suffer through many tape outs, so decades later you can become a circuit designer. If you want to invest in pretty much anything, instead of being very deep, it's actually pretty shallow and time variant, so it changes quickly. You have to be up to date and you have to constantly be learning, but which is actually what goes really well with my personality. So that was great. Because I'm a founder at heart. I decided that rather to stay at my firm, I would go and start my own. So I started Pear 7 years ago with my partner Peshman. We are only doing what we call 0 to 1. So that means we invest in companies very, very early. Many times I would say that most of the times there's no product or there's no customer. So it's pretty scary. Many people will say, I don't help companies with product market fit. I actually really like the challenge of figuring out product market fit. Is a really complex problem. So I do that. And then once we do that, we try to help with recruiting, which is the #1 thing once you figure out something, and then figure out your growth engine and finally fundraising. So we've built the firm all around that. I'm very passionate about a couple of things. One is teaching. I've been teaching at Stanford Entrepreneurship for many years, and I was teaching before circuit design for a decade. So it's actually something I really like. And the second thing is I'm passionate about having more women become great CEOs. So I spend a lot of my free time, whatever I have, trying to support that crowd. So anyways, excited to be here, and feel free to reach out with anything, even after this meeting.
Thanks. Yeah, Mar. Yeah, I've been very impressed with Pear VC. I think one of our best HMC INQ companies, they actually went through Pear.
Yes.
Heard about him. Yeah, young Alfred, and it's a good connection. I wonder, is that how you heard about Harvey Mudd from there?
No, actually my TA for VLSI circuits at Stanford is a professor at HMC. So that's how I heard about HMC like 20 years ago.
All right, well, I don't know, we already got a question, so maybe we'll just start doing the question in the chat here from John Little. Just graduated last year from Mudd. He's really interested in your approach where you stay with the companies. Are there certain companies where you think this approach will work better or worse with? Or is it something that you feel like that strategy can work with any company? And how did you guys, well, it seems kind of unique, like were other people in the VC world skeptical about this approach?
Yeah, people are definitely skeptical about the approach because I think if you look at the history of venture capital, most of the money was made in a couple of really bubble kind of periods. I think if you take out the money that was made in the telecom and .com bubble in the 90s, I don't know if the returns in the industry would be that great. And so if this is what I ask young VCs, like, what do you want to do with your life? You want to build company and create value, or do you want to build a fund management business? And the thing is, in the fund management business, if you sell a worthless company for $1 billion to some strategic buyer, because they see some strategic buy, and this happens all the time, they buy it for $1 billion, and then 2-3 years later, they write it off to zero. Well, you say, well, I did my job. Like, I got to exit. My LPs love me. I have a huge return. It's like, do you really feel good about doing that? How about building the company for real, right? Now, there's one thing is selling it to some strategic. They're sophisticated guys, they're grown-ups. But what if you sell the stock to somebody's grandmother, or you sell the stock to somebody's teacher? Like somebody's teacher's pension fund buys the stock after it goes public, and if that stock blows up, how do you feel about, again, making money that way? What if now somebody's teacher or grandmother buys your stock, and then it goes up by another 10x? Like, how would you, like, would you feel really great about what you did with your life if you built companies that did that? And then my next question is, well, if you think the stock is going to go up another 10x, how come you're selling? Why aren't you buying more? Right. And then I go back to Trinity, one of the early hits we had was Starbucks coffee, and went public in 1991, a year after I joined the firm. And it was a great success. We made 15 times our money in about 2 to 3 years. And we sold the stock after IPO, and they had 146 stores at the IPO. Now there's about 25,000 stores. The stock has gone up more than 300 times. But to me, the big loss is not the billions of dollars that you didn't make by holding onto the stock, because who holds onto a stock for 30 years, right? But the huge miss was the opportunity to build a global business, an amazing business for 20, 30 years. And then the lessons that you learn building a real company like that, they missed it. You don't learn those lessons. And if you learn those lessons, you could take it back and try to give back to the next generation, right? And then the other thing you miss is the relationships that you have. Rewarding relationships with these founders who become our friends over a long period. And then, of course, those founders end up doing really interesting things, like Howard Schultz, invested in eBay, he invested in Square, he's, backed another venture fund, Mavron. He's done a lot of interesting things, and kind of the benefits of that relationship was completely lost on the early investors that cashed out. On the people who stayed with the companies, they might be able to benefit. So anyway, that I think not every company is worth holding on to, and so one of our jobs is to have the judgment to figure out that this is a keeper and this is not. And there's some blog posts on our website to talk about that. It's the latest one was, how do you know? I get this question all the time. How do you know if you're up 100x? How do you know? Maybe you should just sell 10%, like sell 10, 20%, take some profits. How do you know to not sell it, and how do you know to put another 100x? Investment in? I said, well, that blog post talks about it. So I'll pause there. So I won't get into the whole question.
Now that's a good point. Like, I think in my very first talk, I looked up the definition of entrepreneurship, and it was like a venture to create or extract value or something. And I was like, wait a second, like there is a way where you extract value, and it's
create value is like, what do you want to do with your life?
Value. Yeah.
You can make money both ways, but it's just, what do you want to do with your life? That's all you have to think about it.
Definitely. Let's see. Here's a good question for anyone. How has the VC industry overall changed since COVID and increased push for racial equity? So 2020, what's different from your side of things since?
Lots of Zoom. I think I'm an expert at Zoom. I would say, I can tell you a little bit what's happened. It's an interesting thing because COVID obviously has been so terrible for so many people not only here in the US, but around the world. And I sort of feel a little guilty that it's been good for most of digital technologies, right? I think we are working remotely, going to the doctor remotely, everything. So I think there's been a tremendous education is remote. Let's see, Sergio can talk a lot more about that. So there's been, I believe, for the venture community, like a boom of interest in investing in new types of companies. It was kind of, I believe, everybody was kind of scared for 4 weeks or 6 weeks maybe, and then everything kind of picked up. And I think people are very, very active right now. It obviously takes, it's when we are talking to each other over, a screen. It's almost, we're going 2D, so you're missing that third dimension of a face-to-face meeting. So I say you have to have many more 2D meetings to actually get the same info. But we're doing it, we're adjusting. I think people adjust, right? I don't see that trend changing anytime soon. I think a lot of COVID, what has done is accelerated things that were happening already, right? If you are an investor in digital health, you knew it was coming, and it's kind of finally here. And same with online education. Like I said, Sergio can tell a lot more. collaboration tools, everything. So it's actually a good time if you're a founder to go raise money. There's a lot of demand for great founders that are, going after changing the world and thinking what it looks like post-pandemic, not during pandemic, post.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I agree with Mar. And the one thing I would say that ties to what Ho was mentioning is one thing that really encourages me about this dramatic pandemic that we've had is that, and also the racial equity discussions that we've been entering in a sort of a tumultuous way is I've seen that venture capital that works, not only to Co's point, is venture capitalists and entrepreneurs that are really focused on companies that are built to last, but also companies that have a mission and a mission of improving society. And that's why I'm so excited about the thematic approach that I have, which is around the future of essentially, I call it the future of work and the future of learning. But if you think about it, is just the future of humanity on how we can use technology to help humans further themselves and not separate each other. And so there's some underneath sub themes that I'm pursuing within that big umbrella theme that's kind of a catch-all. In reality, it's all about how to use technology to build companies to last long-term with a clear mission that helps humans. And Howard Schultz, great example. Ho, totally agree. He's an amazing person and he's built an amazing company. But in the thematic of future learning, future work, to me, there's hundreds of companies that I can foresee emerging in today's environment that haven't yet been built. In fact, I have a list of what I call companies that I wish existed so I could fund them. And so that tells you that if a VC has all these things they wish they funded, there's not enough entrepreneurs that are kind of out there. There's a need for more entrepreneurs. So that's why I'm hoping that this entrepreneurship initiative with some of the best, which are essentially the Harvey Mudd students and alumni, I think they're the best position to start companies as long as they have the bravery to take on the challenge. And I think that's why I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, I think when you find out a VC has a list of companies that they wish existed, you should try and ask them about that list if you're in a pitch meeting. Yeah, exactly. There you go. What's on that list, Sergio?
I'll publish it.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, in terms of like the racial equity, I mean, it's sort of, I guess it's tangential to COVID. It's just something that I think it's just timing. I mean, there's definitely maybe more social unrest of everyone just like unsure about the future, cooped up, and crazy president type things that are bringing it to more of a head. But a lot of it's just things that have been going on for a long time, and it's sort of like enough is enough. But things, yeah, they just get momentum, or enough stories build up that there's a tipping point where like I don't know what the culture changes that like, at the top it's like, no, we have to actually be serious about board diversity and, funding diversity and, CEO diversity and this whole space. I mean, Maria, the president of Harvey Mudd, has been working on this for, since she became president of Harvey Mudd.
Yeah. Now I have, we had a very recent conversation with a company, and they really care about diversity. They've done a great job, actually. Like half the executive team are women. I don't think they've done as good of a job with racial diversity, but it's a very controversial discussion, because then I got pushback from some of my other partners, like, oh, geez, this is giving me kind of the creeps here, because it reminds me of this other company that really cared about motherhood and apple pie and diversity and all this stuff. And it was not a great company. And so here, this is the thing. As an entrepreneur, okay, your first job is to make your company work, okay? Now, diversity can help you make your company work, but you got to survive first and foremost, and you got to build a business. And if you don't build a business, all your lofty goals and missions and change the world is going to amount to nothing. Now, what ends up happening though is if you're successful, the more successful you get, the more people care about what you think about the world, about various social issues, about whatever. And you have a responsibility. You have a very serious responsibility. The more successful you get, you owe a debt to society, right? And businesses, companies are a part of society, a very important part of society to drive value, create innovation, give employment, all of those kinds of things. And so anybody who becomes a billionaire, anybody who is successful at all in this society, you cannot be successful without being part of this fabric of society. And we all have some responsibility to give back. But until you get to a certain point, right, where you've created the jobs and created the value, if you're distracted with some of these other things, you may never even get to the point. So I think both things are so critical. And I think capitalism has a bad name right now because Milton Friedman in the late 60s convinced everybody that business should be about creating shareholder value. And that is absolutely wrong. And I think now, and that was Milton Friedman in the 60s, okay? In the old days, if you go back hundreds of years in the history of
Harvey Mudd.
Yeah, exactly. If you go back to the history of business and history of capitalism, again, business has a responsibility to the workers, right? To all stakeholders. That's what we talk about, right? Stakeholders. And our planet, our world, our society is a stakeholder. Employees are a stakeholder. We have to take care of employees because if you don't take care of employees, you're not going to have a company, believe me, by the end of the year, right? Or at the end of the day, right? Not end of the year. I mean, we look for all these kinds of things, of course. And so if somebody's just in it just to make money, look, maybe you could do really well, make a lot of money, but eventually, your employees are really smart. They kind of figure it out. They kind of figure out that you're just in it for yourself and you're just in it for money. And this is not something I want to be part of. And we do our decade-long due diligence cycle on companies sometimes before we decide whether or not we want to go really big, or we decide whether or not we want to get the hell out, or we want to put more in or stay in longer. Right. And so if you have a real mission and if you're really doing something that creates value, that is helping the world, and that you're an authentic leader, and that people actually, their values are aligned with your values, they will stay, they will be loyal. And if not, then people are going to leave. Your customers are going to leave you. Your employees are going to leave you. You're not going to have a company. So from your own selfish interests, you have to do the things in the right kind of way. But you got to figure out what is the core value proposition, and you got to figure out how to survive. You got to figure out how to build a real profitable, sustainable business before you start to get too carried away with. So it is kind of a controversial thing, because I know everybody wants to do these great things, but if you get distracted by that, you're not even going to survive long enough to be able to do any of those great things. So I'll pause there.
I would say, this is great. I would say a lot of stuff is correlated. To your point, you have to be this authentic CEO leader to survive this product market fit finding, because you're not gonna, you have to recruit people to come work at your company, and they can get a job at Google or whatever, making a lot more money than what you're gonna be able to offer them at the beginning. So if you are not this passionate leader, that has, mission driven, you're not going to get the great people to join you, right? And those first 10 people really make a difference. So it's, knowing even early on, if you have a co-founder, what's our vision, what's our culture, what do we care about? It's so important. And companies that care about that they're stronger, because there's always this death moments in a company. I mean, at least in my company, is that, one day you wake up and it's like, oh my gosh, we're not going to make it. And only those that have, this strong leader and the strong culture pull through, right? It's really hard otherwise, because it's just near death half the time. At least at the beginning, I would say it feels that way. It's very emotional.
Yeah, I agree with, but I tell you, it's even more important later, because I think it's easy to fake it in the beginning.
Yes.
And so this is the thing that bothers me about Silicon Valley a lot of times, the people who are really good salesmen and the people who are really good at fundraising get the money and get the people, but eventually it's a house of cards that kind of falls apart. because again, your employees are smart, and maybe you could lie about this and you'll get people to join you, but eventually they figure it out. Sometimes they'll figure it out quick, so maybe it'll take them a few years, but eventually they will figure it out. So it becomes really more important later. Yeah.
I think if you look at early signs of why companies are successful, you can look at the first people they hire, how long they stay, right?
Yeah. Yes.
That's a really early signal. People are very smart and have a lot of options. So those are good signs or bad signs, depending on the sign of that of that metric. But yes.
To that point, I wanted just to pitch in on one specific thing that I've seen, and that relates to Mud, and why I'm so excited about Mudders creating companies is I think that the best founders I've seen both in enterprise as well as consumer technologies have both the left brain and the right brain working very well, and the right brain has both have a very strong empathy towards consumer needs so that they could actually really understand the consumer's desires and the pockets of opportunity that exist, so you could actually achieve your product market fit. Once you achieve product market fit, then it becomes a different challenge, which is your go-to-market and your scalability. And at that point, then it's other things, making sure the revenue model and the profitability model work, and a bunch of other things that relate to scaling people and creating a great culture. But at the beginning, it really is about product market fit. And that requires you to just be really in tune with your customers. And I think that the reality is you cannot just be a technologist. You have to be a technologist that understands people, understands desires, understands usage, and understands data to really translate into a better product roadmap. And so to me, that combination, which essentially speaks to HSA, curriculum plus the STEM rigor that we have at Mud, combined with sort of like a sprinkle dust of VC as well as entrepreneurship it's an incredible combination. So that to me is the kind of the secret sauce, and it speaks to really the necessity for you to build a company that really speaks to the customer, that really hits a nerve, hits a pocket of opportunity, because ultimately a startup is only as good as the new level playing field. So it's only as good as is David against Goliath, and when you're playing Goliath's game, you're never going to win. The incumbents will always win. It's about playing a different game. So you've got to redefine the landscape, and that's what startups do really well, and they do it quickly, much quicker than the large guys. So that just becomes a founder and founding team exercise, and that's why it's so important for us to sort of find the right people.
Yeah, Sergio made a really good point about how special Harvey Mudd is. It's been 32 years since I've gotten out of school, and I still don't know of any other college that is like Harvey Mudd in the following sense of combining science, right, and the rigor of STEM education and the humanities, right? That's what Harvey Mudd's core founding principles are all about. And that's, Steve Jobs used to talk about that, where the great work happens between when you combine the humanities and arts with science, and the magic happens when you combine the two. And I think Harvey Mudd, still don't know of any other school that really holds those principles together. And that was such a core founding principle. And we managed money for a lot of different endowments and fancy universities with great missions and all that stuff. There's not a single school that I know of that has that core as Harvey Mudd. So it is a very special combination.
Woo!
Yeah, it's cool. It is. It's a good point.
No.
Yeah.
I think I want to do
we manage some money from Caltech, and they don't have that. Believe me. Harvey Mudd is way better. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And Scripps and Pomona and Pitzer and CFC. Yeah. Let's do the breakout rooms. It's great like this, but I think it's also fun when everyone can get the one on N thing, and time flies when we're having fun. But thank you all for coming for this part, and stick around, and you don't have to leave at 2:30. I'm just gonna say that you don't have to stay past 2:30. So this always takes me a minute because
We just sort of stay here and then people are
Just
going to
sit there and you'll get thrown around by me and you'll probably end up in the wrong room for a minute and then I'll move you back around.
All right,
And,
well, thanks guys to the
Yeah.
big group, and we'll see the smoke.
so don't disconnect. Just wave, but stay.